Hi friends, I am Vaibhav Srivastav from Vaibhav E-Learning Academy, and today we are going to start a new topic in biology, that is breathing and exchange of gases. Now in this series we will try to complete the chapters of human physiology, and the first one is breathing and exchange of gases. So let us start with the video. First let us see the name, that is breathing and exchange of gases. Now this is a very diverse topic. It has a lot of portions to be covered, but we will be learning the limited topics that are there in our syllabus. Now let us understand why do we need to study about the topic of breathing and exchange of gases. Till now we have read about the topic of digestion and absorption. So we have read that we eat food, and this food gives us energy. Our ultimate goal is to get energy and to utilize that energy in our body. How do we do that? There are multiple organ systems in our body responsible for making sure that we get the energy. The first process which we had was eating food, and we have to get energy from this food. Our food contains some substances that are known as nutrients. Now, in nutrients, we have nutrients such as proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acid. These are the nutrients that are available in the food. We have to convert all of this into energy so that we can utilize them to do our day-to-day life processes. Now we have learnt about the structure, chemical nature, and we have learnt about the physiological functions of each and every nutrient in our series of biomolecules. But our today's goal is to identify what is the use of breathing in this process. Now, we have already learnt about the equation of respiration, because we already know that glucose is said to be primary food source or primary nutrient or primary source of energy. This glucose is to be converted into energy, and in our human body energy is in the form of ATP, which means adenosine triphosphate. Now we are taking glucose, we can also take fats and proteins and nucleic acids, but the primary and the major source of energy in human body is glucose. The structure of glucose is C6H12O6. We have learnt about this structure and how to form the structure, chemical structure of glucose and many other carbohydrates in our biomolecules chapter. Now C6H12O6 plus 6O2 gives 6CO2 plus 6H2O plus 38 ATP. This reaction comes when we learn the respiration chapter. In that we see that this is glucose. From where do we obtain this glucose? From the food that we eat. This, we will talk about this later. This glucose is getting converted into ATP, and these are the byproducts. We have already learnt the use of, or how do we get this. We get this from the food that we eat. That was the first chapter, digestion and absorption. Now we'll be thinking and we'll be discussing about this oxygen. How did we get this oxygen in this equation? To get this oxygen we have to perform a very beautiful process that is known as breathing. And breathing, after breathing, what happens inside the body is the exchange of gases. So that is why we need to learn about the topic of breathing and exchange of gases. Now let us start with the first topic of this chapter. Now let us see what this term breathing means. Breathing is nothing but inhalation and exhalation of air. Now what does breathing mean? The definition of breathing is inhalation and exhalation of air. Now there are two terms again over here, inhalation and exhalation. What is inhalation? Inhalation is nothing but intake of air, and exhalation is giving out air. The difference between these two air is the inhaled air has a much concentration of oxygen than carbon dioxide, and the exhaled air has more concentration of carbon dioxide than oxygen. Now, usually inhalation and exhalation combine and form a term breathing. But according to our syllabus, breathing and respiration are the same term. Are same. So in the ncert book they have given that breathing and respiration are the same terms. So in this chapter we can use breathing and respiration alternatively. But there is a very deeper meaning of respiration. Respiration actually means cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is nothing but conversion of glucose to energy. This is known as cellular respiration, and the whole process which involves the process from the intake of air to the cellular respiration is called as respiration in total. So in our book they have given that breathing and respiration are the same, so we can call it in a layman term that this thing is nothing but as respiration. Taking in air and giving out air is called as breathing. Now the total process of breathing, that is one breath, is nothing but 5 seconds. One breath is 5 seconds. Out of the 5 seconds, we have 3 seconds of inhalation and 2 seconds of exhalation. No, sorry, there are 2 seconds. Sorry, this is 2 seconds of inhalation and 3 seconds of exhalation. So we exhale more than we intake, but their quantities of air that we intake and exhale are different. And this we'll be learning further in this chapter, that what are the volumes and the capacities which we are breathing in and breathing out. So this was the basics of what breathing actually means. Now comes exchange of gases. To understand exchange of gases, we have to learn about the process of whole respiration. If we know the process, then we can identify where is the exchange of gases terms coming from. So let us see what are the steps involved in respiration. Steps involved in respiration. There are totally 5 steps in respiration as per our curriculum. The first one is breathing. So breathing is the first step in the whole process of respiration. Breathing, wherein we take in the air and then we give out the air. Second one, we have external respiration. Now what is the meaning of external respiration? So let us draw one structure like this. This is called as an alveoli. Alveoli are the simple, small structural and functional units of lungs which help in the process of breathing. So alveoli, we know that whenever we take in or give out air, it all comes from our lungs. Lungs is nothing but just like balloon, a structure or an organ which is made up of many small balloons, and those balloon structures are nothing but alveoli. So when we breathe or when we do the process of breathing, oxygen and carbon dioxide are present over here. This alveoli is connected with a blood vessel. This is a blood vessel. This whole system is present near the lungs. Oxygen diffuses inside the blood vessel and carbon dioxide diffuses outside the blood vessels. So oxygen enters the blood vessels and carbon dioxide go from the blood vessels to the alveoli. Why does it happen? It happens because of a pressure difference. There is a pressure difference or pressure gradient between them which causes the diffusion of gases along this area. So here in alveoli, the concentration of oxygen is more than carbon dioxide, and in the blood vessel the concentration of carbon dioxide is more. So since here there is more oxygen and less oxygen, oxygen goes from alveoli to blood vessel. And since in blood vessel there is more carbon dioxide goes from blood vessel to the alveoli. This is called as external respiration. This we can also say external exchange of gases. Now why external? Because there is an internal exchange also. We'll see that later. Third one is transport of gas. Transport of gas. Now this blood vessel is filled with oxygen containing cells. These blood vessel later on goes to the tissue, tissue or organ or whatever. Ultimately, it has to reach to the cells, and tissues are nothing but combination of cells, and organs are combination of tissues. So ultimately, this blood vessel which has oxygen containing blood reaches the tissues or organ. Now here what happens is this has a higher concentration of CO2 and this has a lower concentration of O2. Why does it have a higher concentration of CO2? If we remember that equation again, we saw that glucose gives CO2 plus ATP plus O2. So this is inside the tissues or inside the cells. The product released is carbon dioxide, and since tissues is the reaction place, here the carbon dioxide concentration will be more, and since oxygen is decreasing, there will be less carbon dioxide in the tissue. Now this blood vessel has more oxygen and less carbon dioxide. Again here the pressure gradient is created. More oxygen, less oxygen. So oxygen moves from blood vessel to tissues and carbon dioxide moves from tissues to blood vessel. This is called as, this is transportation of gas, that is transport, and the fourth process is internal respiration. This process that I have explained over here is called as internal respiration or internal exchange of gases. So till now what have we learned? We have learned that there is breathing, that is we take in the oxygenated air, and then we have external respiration. This oxygenated air reaches the alveoli of the lungs and there it gets interchanged or exchanged with the blood vessel. This blood vessel has come from this tissue. This originally comes from tissue. Now this blood vessel has more number of carbon dioxide and less number of oxygen. So here we have more carbon dioxide, we have less oxygen. So what happens is oxygen and carbon dioxide partial pressure or pressure gradient is created. Because of that, here there is more oxygen, oxygen comes over here. Oxygen diffuses to the blood vessels. Here there is more carbon dioxide diffuses back to the alveoli. So this is called as external respiration. Then we have transport of gases. This blood vessel containing oxygenated blood now goes to the tissues, it transports. And the fourth process is internal respiration. The same pressure gradient is created over here as well, tissues and the blood vessels. Here also change of gases takes place. This is called as internal exchange of gases. And then the fifth process, that is utilization of oxygen. Now this tissue has received oxygen. This tissue has received oxygen. Since tissues and organs are made up of cells, and we know that cells contain an organelle called as mitochondria. So this process of respiration, conversion of glucose to ATP, occurs inside a cell organelle known as mitochondria. So this mitochondria takes the oxygen, utilizes it and forms energy. And then finally we have the energy. So our main goal for the respiration was to get energy from the food we eat. Now how does that occur? That is a much detailed process and that is known as cellular respiration. We will see that in some other chapter. But in this chapter we have to just know the involvement of breathing in the production of oxygen. So till now we have learnt that the oxygen which we intake is used to break down the glucose to form energy. Now let us move on and let us try to notice or observe some structures which are used for breathing. Let us see. So now let us learn about some respiratory organs. Now what are respiratory organs? Respiratory organs are the organs specialized for some organisms or the organs which help in the breathing process. From the name we have learned breathing and exchange of gases. We now know the meaning of breathing and the meaning of exchange of gases. Why do we do breathing? To take in the oxygen. Why do we do exchange of gases? So that the oxygen reaches the tissues. Now let us see what are the respiratory organs. Now respiratory organs can differ from animal to animal or from species to species because of two reasons. The first reason is because of its habitat, and the second reason is because of its complexity. One because of habitat and one because of its complexity. Now in habitat, there are organisms which live on land, there are organisms which are on the air, and there are organisms which live under the water, or they have aquatic habitat. So first one, let us say one is land, one is aquatic. Now, why do we not include any aerial animals? Because the structures which they use and the structures which the land animals use are the same. Now, talking about complexity, what is the meaning of complexity? Complexity is what is the level of organization of the body. Now, we have learned this in animal kingdom that any organism can have many levels of organization, like cellular level, then we have tissue level, organ level, organ system. Top to bottom complexity increases. So as they are getting more complex, the structures which they use for respiration also gets more complex and more developed. The cellular organisms do not require a lot of highly modified structures for their respiration. The organ system level organizations or animals require a higher level of organ system or a higher level of organ required for their respiration. Now we have two reasons why animals can have different type of respiratory organs. For explaining this, we will require some another time, but we can explain this much easily. On land, lungs are the primary organs for respiration. Lungs are used by most of the animals which are on the land. Then we have aquatic gills or even branchial respiration, but majorly gills are the respiratory organs used by the animals living underwater. The type of respiration which is due to the lungs is known as pulmonary respiration. Pulmonary respiration. What is the meaning of pulmonary respiration? Pulmonary respiration means using lungs as their primary respiratory organ for performing the breathing and exchange of gases. That is known as pulmonary respiration. What about the respiration type in the animals which are in the water, under the water? They are known as branchial respiration. Branchial respiration. Branchial respiration means using their gills for respiration. Now this is the flowchart which we can understand why do different animals need different organs for their respiration. One, because their habitat can be different. Some animals live on land, some animals live on lives on water, under the water. The animals which are on land use lungs as their primary respiratory organ, and this type of respiration is called as pulmonary respiration. The animals which live under the water are called aquatic animals and they use gills as their primary respiratory organ, and this type of respiration is known as branchial respiration. The second reason is the complexity. As the complexity increases, the animal becomes more modified. This is called as evolution. The more the complex the animal, the more the complex the organ for respiration. Cellular, tissue, organ system. These different level of organization have different structures for their respiration. Now we have discussed this topic. Now we will be taking this topic separately and we will try to learn what are the animals, who are the animals which require different structures. To understand that, we will be writing down all the phylums that we have learnt from the animal kingdom. We have 11 phylums which are arranged in the order of their complexity, starting from Porifera to Chordata. So we will be writing down all the phylums. The first one is Porifera, Coelenterata, Ctenophora. Then we have Platyhelminthes. Then we have Ashkelminth. Then we have annelids, arthropods, Then they have mollusca, echinodermata, hemichordata, and chordata. This is the list of 11 phylums: Porifera, Coelenterata, Ctenophora, Platyhelminthes, Aschelminthes, Annelids, Arthropods, Mollusks, Echinodermata, Hemichordata, and Chordata. Out of this, Porifera is cellular aggregate. Coelenterata and Ctenophora, these two are tissue level. Platyhelminthes is the only phylum that is organ level. From Aschelminthes to Chordata, all are organ system level. Now we have arranged the phylums which we know in the order of their complexities. Porifera, Coelenterata, Ctenophora, these are the most basic complexity animals. They perform respiration by simple diffusion. What is simple diffusion? They perform the whole process of exchange of gas and breathing by simple diffusion, that is maintaining the pressure gradient. How do we understand this process of diffusion, or how can we visualize this? It is just by taking two glasses or taking two beakers, interconnecting them with a hole or something like this. Having a beaker and having a partition between them. And then what happens is we start filling water in one beaker. It slowly fills up. Now what happens is there is also water over here. Now the water reaches this level, and here the water is more in this part of the beaker. So what happens is here a gradient is created. Gradient or a difference is created. Because of this, we see here there is nothing. The level is low over here and the level is high over here. Always object needs to attain more stability, and for more stability the energy should be less. So this water tries to flow through this hole into this part. This is also a type of diffusion, where from a smaller or from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, the movement is known as diffusion. Another example of diffusion is when you spray perfume or deodorant in one corner of a room, the smell reaches the other corner of the room as well. Why? Because of diffusion. There is a higher concentration at one area, there is a lower concentration at the other area. So organisms which are cellular and tissue level use the same mechanism to perform their breathing and respiration. They use simple diffusion so that they can exchange the blood or exchange the gases between them. Next, Platyhelminthes is also an organ level but still uses the diffusion method because it is not much well developed. From Aschelminthes to chordates, they all have specialized structures, or they use some different mechanisms for their breathing and exchange of gases. Few of the important ones are annelids, for example. They perform cutaneous respiration. What is cutaneous respiration? They have a layer on their skin called as cuticle, but it's like through body surface. Through body surface. How do they do that? There is a layer of cuticle present around them, which forms the layer of very slippery layer. If you have ever picked up an earthworm, it is very slippery in texture because of a layer called as cuticle. So they perform cutaneous respiration, and this is due to their body surface. So their body has some openings, minute pores and openings through which the gases can exchange. Then we have arthropods. Now we have learnt about this in detail in our cockroach videos, because cockroach is a prime example of an arthropod, because the largest class of arthropoda is insect and the most prominent insect is cockroach. They perform tracheal respiration. If you remember, we had drawn the structure of cockroach like this, and there were 10 pairs of small openings at its lateral side. These were called as spiracles. We have also discussed what is inside the spiracles. There are a network of thin tubes that are known as trachea tubes or trachea. This trachea goes and interdigitates, or trachea forms a small structures known as tracheoles. This type of respiration is called as tracheal respiration. This is more prominent in insects. Then coming to mollusca, they have gills, some special modified gills, and they have, this is not as common like this gills respiration is not like the fishes one. They have specialized structures in the layers of mantle or the below the mantle layers, that is known as gills by molluscas. Prime example of snail. Echinodermata. Echinodermata's prime example is starfish, and they use structures called as tube feet. So nothing but their feet have small structures which are known as tubes, which are present on their feet, that is why they are known as tube feet, and they have the ability to exchange the gases between the surrounding and their own inside body. Then we have hemichordata. Hemichordata is like, it was considered first as chordata, but due to the presence of some other structure instead of notochord, it is called as hemichordata. They also use gills as their primary respiratory organ. Now coming to chordata, we know that chordata is divided into much finer branches. Chordata has amphibia. Chordata has reptiles. Chordata has aves. Chordata has mammals. Now, reptiles, aves, and mammals. Reptiles have examples such as snake. They are the creeping animals. Aves are the animals which fly in the air like the birds, and then mammals are the organisms which feed their baby after the birth. These three groups use lungs as their primary respiratory organ. Amphibia primary example is frog. Frog performs three types of respiration, or like more than three types of respiration as well. If we have to understand amphibia, let us write over here. They can perform cutaneous respiration when they are on the land. What is the meaning of cutaneous? No, under the water, not on the land. When they are under the water, they can perform cutaneous. Cutaneous respiration can be performed all the time as well. What is cutaneous? It is through the body surface. Their body secretes mucus. Mucus makes their body surface slippery and smooth, which performs the exchange of gases. They can also use lungs. When they are on the land, they can also use lungs for the exchange of their gases. They have buccopharynx. What is buccopharynx? Inside their mouth, when they open their mouth, there are some structures present inside the buccal cavity which also helps them in diffusion of gases, and also gills in tadpole stage. When their larva, that is tadpole, is born, like the larva is present under the water, they have gills as their primary structure. So for now we have understood how the primary organ or primary structures for respiration can vary among different animals due to their complexity levels. We started from the porifera till the chordata. From porifera to chordata, the complexity of the animal increases. Porifera is cellular level and chordata is organ system level. Porifera, Coelenterata, Ctenophora and Platyhelminthes use simple diffusion for the exchange of gases. They work on the concept of pressure gradient between two gases. Astelminthes to chordata use different organ systems for their respiration. Prime example of annelids, they undergo respiration through their body surface, that is called as cutaneous respiration, because there is a layer of cuticle on their body. Arthropodas undergo tracheal respiration, they have a whole tracheal system for that. Molluscas and hemichordatas use gills. Echinodermatas have tube feet on them for the respiration. And chordates are divided into four further subclasses: amphibia, reptiles, aves, and mammals. Amphibia use cutaneous, lungs, buccopharyngeal, and gills, all type of respiration. Reptiles, aves, and mammals use lungs. They use pulmonary respiration as their primary respiratory organs. Now we have understood the concept of why different organisms need different types of respiratory organs. Now let us learn a little bit about the lungs and the alveoli. Let us see. So now let us learn about the human respiratory system. Human respiratory system. Now we'll be discussing about what is the pathway for the gases to enter the human body. So for our reference, let us draw one guy over here. We have some paths like this. This branches into lungs. So this is going to be the rough outer outline for our human respiratory system. This starts from nostrils. Nostrils are the two small openings present on the outer side of the nose. Gas enters through the nostril. After nostrils, we have nasal chamber. Nasal chamber, or we can also call this as nasal cavity. Nasal cavity is a better word, nasal cavity. Now, nasal cavity has also two parts, exterior nasal cavity and interior nasal cavity, but we are going to learn just the outer part, that is nasal cavity. From the nostril, it goes to the inside part of the nose, that is called as nasal cavity. From nasal cavity, let us go directly to this part over here, to pharynx. We have learned about this pharynx term when we were discussing about the digestion chapter as well, when we were discussing the alimentary canal. Then also pharynx term came. Pharynx is known as common passage for both food and air. Common passage, sorry. This is the common pathway. From here, both the esophagus and the windpipe connects. Then we have trachea. Before trachea, we have larynx. Larynx is nothing but a sound box. We have learnt in detail about larynx in our video where we learnt about the human skeletal system. So here there is a sound box present that is called as larynx. This larynx has an outer cartilage covering. The uppermost layer of larynx is called as glottis, and glottis is covered by a flap called as epiglottis. Epiglottis covers the glottis, and when we are eating food, what happens is sometimes some food particles enters the air pathway. So epiglottis is usually covered while we are swallowing in the food, but sometimes when the food particle enters the glottis pathway, there is a abruption movement in the epiglottis region. So because of that, we cough while eating food. After larynx, we have trachea. Trachea is nothing but windpipe. This trachea is called as windpipe. This extends from second to actually this trachea divides into two parts, that is called as bronchi. Till here we have trachea, and this is called the T5 region. Now what is T5? If we remember the video about skeletal system, we have learned that there is a vertebral column present in the human body. Vertebral column has 26 bones, out of which there is a section of bone that is called as thoracic. The first one is cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacrum and coccyx. So at T5 region, at the fifth thoracic region, this trachea divides into two parts that is called as bronchi. Now this bronchi can further, like this is the trachea. This trachea divides into two bronchi. This is actually called as primary bronchi. This primary bronchi divides into further small components, that is known as secondary bronchi. And this secondary bronchi again divides into smaller parts, that is known as tertiary bronchi. So in short, we can say that there is a branch occurring. Like if you see a tree, this tree has a branch. This branch has further branches. This further branch has like more small branches. That is why this structure is called as a respiratory tree. So as we go from the top to bottom, the top part here is said as to be the main wood of the tree, and as we go deep inside the lungs, it forms a branch. That is why this is called as respiratory tree. Bronchi, there are three bronchi: primary, then secondary and then tertiary bronchi. After bronchi, we have bronchioles. What are bronchioles? When these bronchi also get divided into small tube-like structures, they are also called as bronchioles. Now, there are primary bronchioles, secondary bronchioles. What we are interested is, we have respiratory bronchioles, and then we have terminal bronchioles. Terminal bronchioles. What are terminal bronchioles? Terminal bronchioles are the last part where, okay, I haven't told you this, but the respiratory tree or whatever you are seeing from pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, these all are covered by C-shaped cartilaginous rings. They are covered like this. Now, why are they covered with C-shaped cartilaginous rings? This is a trachea. They are covered by C-shaped rings. Why? So that they can provide the support. There is a vertebral column behind to provide the support from backside, and then we have the trachea and the whole respiratory tree, and they are covered by half C-shaped cartilaginous rings so that they don't get collapsed in the front side. Terminal bronchioles are the part of the bronchioles which start not having these C-shaped rings. Till respiratory bronchioles, we have the C-shaped rings. After terminal bronchioles, we have alveolar ducts, and then we have alveoli. Now, to explain alveolar ducts and alveoli, we have to rub this. This bronchioles are divided into alveolar ducts. These are very thin ducts and they comprise of alveoli. Alveoli are nothing but balloon-like structures. They are 300 million in each lung. It means each lungs have 300 million number of alveoli. They perform exchange of gases. Alveoli perform exchange of gases. That is the first one, external respiration. These alveoli are very small. These are the structural and functional units. Like for example, when we talk about kidney, nephrons are the structural and functional units of kidneys. When we talk about the nervous system, neurons are the structural and functional units of nervous system. Similarly, alveoli are the structural and functional units of lungs. This is the unit which performs respiration or which perform exchange of gas between the lungs and the blood vessels. Now, this alveoli is actually very thin walled. Why is it thin walled? For obvious reason. Why? It has to perform diffusion. We have learned in the tissues chapter as well, there are squamous tissues. We learned about squamous tissues, and in squamous we have the simple squamous tissues. Epithelium tissues, the simple squamous epithelium tissues. We learned that alveoli is an example of simple squamous epithelium tissue. These simple squamous epithelium tissues help in the diffusion between the alveoli and the blood vessels. Later on in this chapter, we will be learning more about this diffusion membrane. There are three membranes which the gas has to pass to flow from alveoli to the blood vessels. We'll learn that later on when we go in more detail about the chapter. For now, we had to learn the pathway of the human respiratory system. It all started from the nostrils and it all ended to the alveoli, to the structural and functional part of the lungs. From nostrils to nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, from trachea to bronchi, then bronchioles. Bronchi are much further divided into three parts: primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi. Then bronchioles, which are primary bronchioles, secondary bronchioles, tertiary bronchioles. Then we have respiratory bronchiole. Then we have terminal bronchioles. Terminal bronchioles are the bronchioles which do not have the C-shaped cartilaginous rings. While all these have, from trachea to respiratory bronchioles, all have C-shaped rings so that they can prevent this structure from collapsing. Then we have alveolar ducts and alveoli. Alveolar ducts, these are the alveolar ducts. The ducts which connect to the alveoli. And then alveoli. Alveoli are balloon-like structures. There are 300 million alveoli in each lungs, and then they perform the exchange of gases. They are very thin walled and they are lined by simple squamous epithelium tissues. Now, till now we have discussed about what actually breathing is, what is exchange of gases. We have learnt about breathing and exchange of gases, and then we have learnt about how and why do different animals have different organs required for respiration, and now we have learnt about the human respiratory system. In the next video, we will be learning about the mechanism. of the respiration, mechanism of breathing, mechanism of exchange of gases. How does the exchange of gas takes place? How does breathing takes place? Then we'll be learning about the respiratory volumes and capacities. How can we measure what is the amount of gas that we intake per breath? And then we'll be finally learning about how these gases are transported, and then about the disorders. So see you next time in the next video. Thank you and goodbye. Do subscribe to the channel and like the video if you like this.